Hey everybody. So this is the first episode of Circuits 101, which is a new series I'm starting, which teaches you everything about circuitry. The first episode is going to be the basics, which is this episode. So let's go ahead and get started. First of all, we're going to go over some basic settings for circuitry. First of all, always have your snapping on surface when you're doing circuitry. This lets you place things on the walls of your rooms and just makes it way easier to do stuff. Like if I spawn in this get local player chip, I can click on it and you see it like goes on different sides of it. And if I click right here, something that can, connect to it, which we'll go over later, it will connect automatically, which is nice for us. But we'll go over connecting and all that stuff later, so don't worry about being confused about that. Gun, circuit and debugging. Now, you want to have all these settings on. You want to have always snap circuits on, debug execution wire flash on, debug data wire flash on, debug hover over wire flash on, and debug targeted execution. Always snap circuits means that even when you don't have surface on, you'll still snap circuits next to each other when being moved, which is really nice to have, because obviously sometimes you won't have surface on if you're like building a map. Debug execution wire flash, essentially when something runs, which we'll go over eventually, it just flashes that, makes it glow. Debug data wire flash does the same thing, except it does it when something is being used, which we'll go over. Debug hover over wire flash is when you're hovering over a wire or like a port, it will glow. Debug targeted execution, when you hover over an execution, which we'll go over eventually, it will actually run it, which is really useful for testing. Next, you might want error sound effects on. I have mine always off because they do get a little annoying, but you can have them on just to hear if there's any errors happening. Right error diagnostics, there's nothing really good about that. Now, in general settings, there's nothing we really need. The only thing I sometimes use is show components when not holding maker pen, because when I unhold my maker pen, everything over there still shows. So yeah, that's basically it. Now, let's see CPU, net, and chip up here. Those are there because those are limits that Rec Room circuitry has to follow. CPU is essentially how much the CPU on your headset, which is the processor, can handle. So essentially, if I'm spamming something on someone's system, my CPU is going to be pretty high because it's handling a lot of things. And net is for like when things are synced. So if I keep on setting a text that's synced, my net usage will go up. Obviously, it won't always go up for me, unless if I run it on my machine. We'll talk about that later. Chip is how many chips you can have in your room, so how many circuits you can have in your room. The basic amount is 5,000. But I'm pretty sure if limits v2, that is changed. Now logging. Head over to your logging tab here. This is error logs. So if any error is happening with your circuitry, it will tell you in here. So like, if something's not set up right and you run it, it's going to tell you in this logging information board. Also, you can spawn in a text screen and configure it to show error logs, which will show an error when it happens with your circuits. Okay, to the actual circuitry part. First of all, we're going to be going over all the data types. Okay, we're going to be going over data types. Okay, the first type, which is the main type, which is the orange execution port. So this orange execution port is an execution, which means when you run this, it will run the circuit also. Now, when you run this, after a circuit's done doing whatever it needs to do, it will send off an execution here, signaling that it's done. Now, in order to trigger these, you need something that can send out an execution, like a button. So you bring out a button, as you see here, it has all of these ports. We're only going to be messing around with these execution ports right now. You want to use your connect tool, hold down on the pressed, and drag it over to here, and let go. Now it's wired. Now, if I hit it, you'll see that does this, and it goes through. Now, if I like clone this or something, and I wire this execution port to here, you'll see that they both cause like a chain reaction. Okay, so that port is the integer port, otherwise known as a whole number. Integers are whole numbers, if you don't know what integer means. Actually, whatever number you put in to whatever, this is a whole number. I'll say in something else. So this just holds a number that could be used for other things. Like int variable I have here, I put a number in here. It only shows whole numbers. So if I try putting like 8.9, it's just gonna get rid of the point and make it 89. I make it like 3. If I hover over it with my wire tool, it'll say 3. It's only a whole number. Or the float variable. I'm using these chips as kind of a explanation of things, so don't worry if I mess up like that. So this is a float. Floats are decimals and whole numbers. So don't know what a decimal is. It's a number that's like, it could be like 5, be 0.9 if you want to. I don't know why my keyboard's doing this. It could be 0.9, it could be whatever. So it's just decimals and whole numbers. Next, we have vectors, which I'm actually going to go grab a get position real quick. This is just an example. This is a position. Positions are known as a vector 3, which is a position port. This allows you to identify a position in world space. So if I like wires target on this get position, this is just an example, to this yellow port, which is actually an identifier port, which identifies the object that the circuit board is on. If I wire this target to the yellow top port on the button, I hover over the position, it shows the position under here of the button. That's basically the basis of the vector 3 ports. Now, something else that's really confused sometimes are called quaternions, which is just rotation. So I'm going to grab a quaternion chip. So again, so see, this is just rotation. This is just rotation. So I'm not going to go over rotation, like how to make rotations and all that stuff. This is just a rotation. A quaternion and a vector 3 are two very different things. A vector 3 is a position, a quaternion is a rotation. Now, another pretty important one is the bool. Sorry, not bool variable, bool. A bool is true or false. So if I make this true, that makes it so that essentially if you like grab an if chip, if I grab an if chip here, now I make this true, and I wire this up to here, anything that I put under this then will go, because this equals true. If it's false, anything that goes under else will go up to here. So let me show that for you. So if this is true, I wire this up to then, see, it goes through. But if I wire this up to else, it will not go through, because this is not false. Click on it, turns to false, now it runs. Next we got player ports. Player ports are essentially what you're seeing here. It grabs a player, essentially any player you want in the room. Now I'm not going to go over these too in depth, because a lot of chips use it and it's hard to really like show it, but it just gives out a player that can be outputted from a chip or from like circuit board, which you're showing here. Because I press this button, it updates this player to be my display name. Will not show your at name unless you do some more complex circuitry for that, but we'll go over that later. Well, not in this episode. This is just the basics. The string is a text. It's just a text. You could put anything in that text. It's a text. So a string is a text. I'm using a string format here, but if you put something in this text, so if I like click on here and just type in stuff, I'm just gonna type in nothing, click on done. See, it appears on this other side. Obviously, string formats are way more complicated than that, so I'm not gonna use that as a good example. Okay, that is everything you need to know. Obviously, there are some ports that only go for certain objects, which aren't like identifiers. Essentially, on like a circuit board, it like specifies something in the inputs, but I'm not gonna go over every single one of those. That's literally just the identifier one. Okay, so those are mainly the basics of circuitry. I will go over more complex chips and what chips do certain functions in the next episode of this, if this actually gets any traction or not. Next, we're going to move on to networking. Networking is the most important part of CV2, by far. Don't know networking, you basically can't do anything in CV2. So here we have 3 networking chips. Okay, first of all, I need to go over the local player. The local player is yourself. Anything that uses local is yourself. But here on this if local player should run, if we identify a player in here, it would run anything out of this should run only on their system locally. Won't run on anyone else's system. Only their system. So that's basically that. But the get local player, for you, it would show your player. Show you. If local player should run would allow you to run things on specific players' machines that shouldn't be going towards everybody in the room. Okay. The room authority in Rec Room is basically who has the best computer in the room. So Rec Room basically utilizes your specs, essentially. So let me put in action here. If a Quest 1 player, well, Quest 2 player actually, Quest 2 player enters a room and he's all by himself, he's the room authority because no one else is in the room and he has the best specs in the room. Then let's say a PCVR player joins or a Quest 3 player. If their PC or a Quest 3 is better than the Quest 2, then the Quest 2 player, they would become room authority. And room authority is essentially the player that runs all the circuitry in the room, unless specified, they shouldn't run some circuits. Now, I'm not going to go way in depth on this, but if we go ahead and get the room authority in here, so there's a chip for this. It's actually called Get Room Authority, I'm pretty sure. Get Room Authority. In here, if I hover over this, since I'm the only person in this room, I'm the room authority. But if like a PCVR player were to join, since I'm on Quest 2, and their PC is better than a Quest 2, they would become room authority. They would be running all the circuitry that should be ran for everybody in the room. So that's basically all of that.